Hello, George Mason University, and welcome to Watch This. I'm your host, Frank Cole, with my co-host, Tommy Britt. We're both professors with the Film and Video Studies program, and today our episode is going to be Halloween and horror movies. We're going to focus specifically on the 2009 film, Last House on the Left. Tommy, what do you have to say about this movie?
Well, it has a storied past because it was originally a film in 1960 called Virgin Spring, directed by Ingmar Bergman, which Wes Craven did a totally unauthorized remake of, and only in retrospect gave credit to Virgin Spring when he made Last House on the Left in 1972. And then this 2009 film is an authorized remake with Craven's blessing of his 1972 film. So, I mean, given that history, you have a lot of things that can change with the script, and probably one significant thing to start talking about is how the culture changed. So, you know, obviously with 1972 version, it was about the end of the Summer of Love, and you could justify some of the violence in the film by saying, well, that's what it's actually about. But I wonder what you would say the new film has in that way.
Well, in terms of its violence, it's definitely one of the main themes of the film.
Definitely.
And to me, violence in any kind of movie, film, in terms of a narrative, really has to serve the narrative, at least for me to enjoy it. Whereas the 2009 remake, unfortunately, I don't have the frame of reference having not seen the 1972 film, but in the 2009 version, I don't know, the violence, while the special effects are well executed, it just felt really gratuitous. It was as if though that was really the main theme of the story, that the narrative was there only to serve the violence and not vice versa.
Do you think there's a justification for that?
I suppose we could try to put it in a larger cultural context with, you know, the issue of you know, the United States and torture as a part of our, you know, foreign military maneuvers. But for me,
I think that'd be stretching.
Yeah, it's a huge stretch. It's untenable. Ultimately, I just look at it as violence for the sake of box office revenue.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point you make about how everything else in the film is serving the violence. But do you think it's possible critically to look at a film and say, well, did it do what it did well? And did they sustain a violent tone? Is the impact of the film related to how well they executed the violence? And even if that might not justify it morally, is there something admirable about the way they sustained that fearful, violent tone?
Well, the thing that I will give the film in terms of its violence and its pacing is the fact that the 2009 version, there was definitely a sense of urgency throughout the entire film. I would attribute most of that to the direction and camera work than I would necessarily to the actors, most of whom I felt kind of gave flat, wooden performances. So definitely the directing and the editing helped keep a sense of thriller-like urgency to it.
Yes.
But I wouldn't even call this a horror film per se. I would just call it a violent thriller. Like, to me, there was nothing truly, I mean, horrible things, unfortunate things happened in it, but I was not psychologically moved. I was not, you know, shaken, at my center.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be a kind of a low-level splatter film, you might call it,
yes.
Splatter film.
With a big budget.
With the big budget, I don't know do you know what the budget was?
I am not entirely sure.
It looks good.
It does look very good.
What they got on film or video looks good, and what they released has a sheen to it that certainly makes it look like a more professional production than the 1972 film. Maybe we should review the plot for people who haven't seen it. Roughly.
We should try to avoid spoiling the ending, though. I mean,
yeah.
You and I have discussed the ending, and what a scene.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's sort of, if we're going with this idea that the violence is what everything else in the film serves, then by that standard, the climax is very successful.
It is, indeed.
So it all depends on which lens you view it from. But I think that, you know, we could say on a basic level, it's a film about a good girl who makes a poor choice when she leaves her parents' vacation home and meets up with some people that make it really hard for her to get back home. When she manages to get back home, her parents have a moral choice of their own to make. Because why?
Well, essentially, she is the victim of rape at, well, you could call them, they're essentially a stock Manson family.
Yes.
They are not developed. They're simply a group of psychopaths. The father figure in the family rapes the young girl. By an ironic twist of fate, this family and the young girl both end up back at her parents' home, vacation home.
Which significantly, and I don't think this will spoil too much, but in the 1972 version, plays out the same way, except they do kill the daughter, and the parents go and find the body after they realize that these people have been involved. So it actually changes the dynamic, because whereas in the 2009 version, there's that facade of hope, you know, she's going to get back and they're going to make it through this. In the 1972 version, there is no hope. She's dead, and it becomes about their vengeance.
A revenge fantasy.
Which is much more in keeping with the Virgin Spring, wherein she's killed off-site, and this kind of magical plot item of a dress that these attackers try to give to the mother of the daughter signals that these are the people responsible.